We're diving into Maryland. Maryland's a game a lot of folks forget is on the schedule. It can't be an overlooked game for Minnesota, but could Minnesota be overlooked by the rest of the media when it comes to playing Maryland? We'll break down this whole matchup today.
You are Locked On Golden Gophers, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Gopher fans? You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Today, we're a little bit mixed up, but we're going to have weekend shows, so we'll get it back caught up, making sure we're staying on track and on time for this full season review when it comes to breaking down our opponents and getting to know all the changes that they have going on, but then also turning to ourselves and bring down every position group in the rooms for Minnesota. So we've got all that coming up. We're about halfway, just a little halfway past halfway in the season. In our opponent breakdowns, we're talking about the week 9 opponent, which is the first opponent after the bye week for the Gophers, and that is the Maryland Terrapins, a home matchup for Minnesota. We're going to break down any coaching changes, any player updates, personnel updates, and the make or break, along with strengths and weaknesses for the Maryland Terrapins. Then we're going to talk a little bit of women's basketball. It's been a minute since we've done that. I want to talk about some of the things I'm excited about, some of the things that could help this team take the next step, and some recruiting updates we've found out. So be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube so you don't miss any of your daily Gophers content, especially as we head into this 2024 football season. I'm also going to be at the Gophers practice on Tuesday, so you're definitely going to want to tap in, because our Tuesday or Wednesday show this week will be a review of what we have seen. It's the final practice available to the media. Hopefully some things have cleaned up. Hopefully some questions have been answered, but we'll cover that later this week. So first, let's talk about our matchup with the Maryland Terrapins. Behind the enemy lines, let's talk about the coaches at first. Mike Locksley, the head coach for the Maryland Terrapins, entering year 6. Now, he was the offensive coordinator for Maryland from 2012 to 2015. Then he goes to Alabama. Starts off as an offensive analyst. Then he moves to a co-offensive coordinator. Then he moves to the offensive coordinator of the Alabama team in 2018, where he wins the Broyles Award for the best assistant coach of the year. And his work with Bama in 2018 was nice. His work with Bama in 2017 got them to a national championship. So overall, he has done a lot, but then he comes back to Maryland 2019 till today. And he's helped turn that program around for the better. They started off with a few seasons of 1 win, 2 win, 3 wins, and it was more of the, or less of the same for a Maryland team that has been struggling over the past few decades. But then you look at what happens after that. He leads the program to the first time in program history of winning 3 straight bowl games, and that was these past 3 seasons, where he had a 7-win season, an 8-win season, and an 8-win season. Now, those back-to-back 8-win seasons in 22 and 23 are also the first back-to-back 8-win seasons for this Maryland program since 2002, 2003. So Mike Locksley, although he might not have the upside or the high double-digit win so far with this Maryland program, he has been getting them trending in the right direction and doing it fairly consistently over these last 3 years. Now, if you notice, these last 3 years, they've also had Talia Tungavailoa, who has been the quarterback at the helm for them, a very important player. Another player who's been very key for 2 of those 3 years is Roman Hemby. So they lost one of those players. They still have one this year, but is it more of the personnel he's had, or is it the coaching itself? We're going to find out in these next few years. Now, you move the offensive coordinator. It's Josh Gattis, offensive coordinator in year 2. Now, Gattis has done a lot for college football programs. He's been with a lot of prime experiences. Penn State pass game coordinator from 2014 to 2017, the Bama co-offensive coordinator in 2018, and then a Michigan offensive coordinator from, I believe it was 2019 to 2021. And then he goes to Miami for an offensive coordinator position, and then he is now with the Maryland Terrapins, last year being his first year. Now, switching positions this year, this offseason, he's going from being a quarterback's coach to a wide receivers coach. So the focus is changing. But overall, Gattis led his first season with Maryland and saw a few successes and helped the Terrapins get to their 3rd straight bowl game win and 2nd consecutive win in 8 seasons. We've already talked about that. But on the offense, the Terrapins were a dynamic team, especially through the air. Talia Tagovailoa led the Big Ten in nearly every passing category at the end of the season, and he earned second team All Big Ten honors. Now, under Gattis, the Terrapins finished fourth in the Big Ten in points per game, so that was definitely their best mark in quite some time. They averaged nearly 30 points a game. Now, flipping into the defensive coordinator, you've got Brian Williams, year 6 with the Maryland Terrapins, year 3 as the defensive coordinator. Now, this defense has allowed less points per game each year since 2019. They've got better and better and better in that category every single year, and that's something you love to see from your defensive coordinator. We'll see if they can keep that up, but this defense was a key for Maryland winning their bowl game last year versus Auburn in the Music City Bowl, in their third straight bowl in a row. So hopefully with some consistency and some carryover, the defense will stay consistent for Maryland in this upcoming season. Now, when we're talking about transfers coming into the Maryland Terrapins, they had 8 total transfers coming in, but the thing is, they were very particular, very similar to what Coach Fleck in Minnesota have done in the transfer portal, where it's not about how many you bring in, but how many can contribute in a meaningful way. And that looks like that's what Maryland's doing this offseason. 8 total transfers, but every single one of the 8 could end up a starter by the time we hit this regular season. Now, you've got Isaiah Wright, an interior offensive lineman from Buffalo. He was their starter full-time. You've got Aliu Ba, a tackle from Georgia. So, if he's coming from Georgia, that he probably has a lot of upside, but didn't have the opportunity to play. So he's looking to get his first starting opportunity, but really show out on that high caliber recruit that he was. Then you've got Alan Herring coming from the D2 levels, but he was very productive there, and he'll probably be a starter for Maryland as one of their tackles. And then you've got Josh Kaltenberg, who is an interior offensive lineman. He played at Purdue last year. He started multiple games for Purdue, so he has some Big Ten starting experience. And then, so that's 4 offensive linemen right there coming from the transfer portal. You've also got Jalen Husky coming from Bowling Green. He was their best cornerback by far on a defense that led the entire nation in turnovers last year, I believe. And then MJ Morris, a quarterback coming from NC State, North Carolina State. And he only played 4 games last year. He decided to sit out. He decided to use his red shirt to keep more eligibility for a new team that he knew he was going to be transferring to, and that team ended up being Maryland. So he comes in, and he is hopefully going to be their starting quarterback for them for the next few years, like they saw with Talia Tagovailoa 3 years ago. Now, they also have a new kicker, a new long snapper, and a new punter. Scratch the long snapper part. They have a new kicker and a new punter. The kicker comes from ECU. The punter comes from Notre Dame. But that's a lot of new players, a lot of players you're hoping make impact. But will they do it at an elite Big Ten type level? That's the big question. But breaking down these rooms, quarterback, the most important battle of the offseason for the Terrapins between MJ Morris and Billy Edwards. Now, Billy Edwards was with the team this last year, but in limited action and not at a very good clip. 10 for 30 in his limited game action, 33% passing, which is no bueno, along with 1 touchdown and 1 interception. It sounds like this is going to be a battle in the fall, but I highly anticipate MJ Morris winning that job. It's his job to lose, in my opinion. We'll find out in the end, but MJ Morris comes from NC State. He's a redshirt sophomore this year. Last season, he was 55% completion, so not the greatest in that area, but 719 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions across 4 games. Now, if you take those interceptions down a bit, that production isn't terrible. You'd like to see the completion percentage come up, but Morris has the upside, but he's far from the consistency that they've seen from Talia Tagovailoa. So it could take some time to get them back to that relevant, maybe winning 7-8 games. This could be a down year for Maryland if they can't find a way to click on the offense. But then you move to the running back room, and this is an important room for them, at least at the top side with Roman Hemby. He leads the room for a 3rd straight season this upcoming season, and quite honestly, he could be a running back that is overlooked in the Big Ten. Now, last year, Hemby had 680 yards with 4 touchdowns rushing, and then he had 349 receiving with another 3 touchdowns, and the year prior, he had 989 rush yards with 10 touchdowns rushing and 298 with a touchdown receiving. So he can do it both in the air and on the ground. He is a safety valve for new quarterback, and I think he's going to be the make or break for this offense, a key cog for their season. This offense heavily relies on Hemby with a question mark at quarterback, and he'll likely be the largest cog of the offense once again, but they also have a young, talented 4-star running back in the room now to keep an eye on in DeJuan Williams. Now you move to the wide receivers room. This is probably their deepest room. They have the strongest returning wide receivers by far that they've had over quite some time. They've got Ty Felton, Caden Prather, Octavian Smith Jr. They're all back. Those 4 or 3 players all had over 200 yards receiving last year. Octavian had 200 plus, and then you had Felton and Prather, who both combined for 1,389 yards and 11 touchdowns. I believe Prather was in the above 650 range for yardage, and Felton was above 700 yards. And then they had 5 and 6 touchdowns apiece. So that's a lot of returning production from your wide receiver room. You still lose your top receiver, and I think it was Jay Jones. I can't remember his first name right now off the top of my head. It might have been Jay Sean Jones. But regardless, he was the top receiver there with 790 yards receiving, but you still have a healthy amount of returning production. And so those 3 should be the main figures of that wide receiver room. There isn't a guarantee that we'll have to see anybody beyond those 3, but maybe we see some younger talent sprinkled in as well. Now you move to the tight end room. Last year, they really fed Deitches as their tight end. He had almost 500 yards receiving on almost 450 receptions total. That being said, he's no longer with the program. So who is next up? Well, Preston Howard finished last year with 160 yards on 13 receptions and a touchdown. He'll likely look to step into that Deitches role. And then you got Dylan Wade beyond him, who would maybe take his former role and have more of a close to 200 yards in production. But the tight ends are weapons in this Maryland offense. Now, the biggest question mark, the biggest it factor, the biggest make or break for Maryland could be the offensive line. Maryland lost a ton from this offensive line room. Only 1 player returns from last year's starters. That's Kyle Long, who was the lowest graded starter on the team by PFF all last season. Now they're hoping to piece the rest of this thing together with a bunch of transfers who could work out, or it could go horribly wrong. You're taking in Aliu Bao from Georgia. He hasn't started very much. He hasn't played very much, but he has that high upside and was just with one of the best programs in the SEC. Now, he could be a nice addition. You also have Wright, Kaltenberger, and Heron, who have all had starter experiences at varying levels, but we'll see if it all comes together. We'll see if it can be a patchwork job or if it's going to be a struggling offensive line that can't stop a nosebleed. Now, the reason I believe this Maryland team could struggle this year is completely having that basically built from scratch offensive line and a young transfer quarterback who might not be ready to read the field at the speed he needs to in the Big Ten in year 1 for him in a new system. Now you flip it to the defense. Last year, Maryland was 30th in total defense, 38th in pass defense, 32nd in rush defense, 39th in scoring defense, and 12th in the nation in turnovers gained. So as you can see from those numbers, Maryland was fairly consistent across the board on defense. They didn't really have a struggle, and they didn't have necessarily a strength. They were very consistent and consistent at a good level. They were essentially a top 30 defense on the year, and that helped them stay competitive in some matchups versus Ohio State for like 3/4 of the game, versus Michigan for the entirety of the game, only losing by 1 score, but they also had a couple of blunders. They also had some inconsistency, and they fall to a team like Illinois and Northwestern putting up like 27, 34 points on against them. So overall, the defense had some hits and had some misses, but overall a top 30 team on the defensive side of ball with a lot of players returning. I think it could be a strong suit for this Maryland team. The final thing we're talking about is the class of 2024. They have 23 commits coming in with 2 4-stars. Braden Jacob, a safety from Florida, and DeJuan Williams, a running back from the Maryland area. Now, not only will Maryland need the defense to remain a high caliber team defense, but they will also need to find the right option to start at quarterback and hope that this patchwork offensive line can keep it together and keep their quarterback off of the turf. Now, the final things we're going to talk about coming up next are the strengths, the weaknesses, and the key players, or not key players, but the make or break moments, make or break things for that Week 9 matchup for the Gophers. That's what's coming up next. Now, first, I want to talk to you about our friends over at FanDuel, because it's time to get in on the action. Football season is quickly approaching, and FanDuel has all the best deals for you, and the summer is not over yet, and that means FanDuel has a different deal, a bonus, or a boost for you every single day on the daily. That's right. All summer long, every single day, you get a daily boost or bonus opportunity to take advantage of over on FanDuel. And right now is the perfect time to get in on some futures bets for your NFL season, for your college football season. Maybe there's a couple players that you want to take a shot on for the Heisman. Maybe there's some statistical numbers that you feel like, look, I think that the Will Howard is going to shatter these passing numbers. Now, I'm probably not there because I'm not a big believer in Will Howard. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets replaced by the end of the season by one of the younger kids. But overall, now's the time to get in on the action, and you can do it today with FanDuel.com. FanDuel, official partner of MLB and official partner of Locked On. All right, Gophers fans, let's talk about the one and the only. Let's talk about strengths, weaknesses, and the make or break for this week 9 matchup at home for the Golden Gophers against the Maryland Terrapins. Now, when you're talking about Maryland's strengths, you're definitely talking about an experienced offensive coordinator and an experienced head coach. You've got staff continuity for another year. That's really big for a team that's looking to continue to build and rise and grow like they have over the last 3 years. That being said, they've lost a very key cog in their quarterback, and that could be tough. But MJ Morris was a player that has a lot of upside. But regardless of that, the staff is going to look to pull it out of him. Now, another strength for the team is a really strong lead running back in Roman Hemby. I think that he is a little bit underrated across the conference. He's very consistent, but he's a weapon in the air and on the ground, and that is a strength for this team. Now, you also have a lot of returning production in your pass catchers, and that is definitely a positive because if the quarterback can click, he knows he has reliable weapons to rely on and guys that have done it before, been there and understand the system and should be in the right place in most occasions. And then finally, you have a good amount of defenders coming back from 2024 or back in 2024, I should say. And this was a team that was like a top 30 defense consistently for all of last season. So those are your strengths that you're dealing with, but the weaknesses could outweigh the strengths. You've got a patchwork O-line with 4 new starters, all being transfers and haven't been within the system. That's a whole lot of learning and not a whole lot of time because you never really get live looks. You don't get live bullets until you really get into week 1, game 1, because your players are not coming full speed to kill your quarterback. But week 1, game 1, they will be. And that's when this offensive line will be tested the most. So we'll see if that becomes an issue and how quickly it can come together throughout the season. Now, another question mark is your quarterback. This is a weakness right now because they have the ability to be an athlete. They have the ability to have the upside, but do they have the ability to get through the reads quick enough at the Big Ten D1 football level? That's going to be a big question. 5 interceptions in 4 games last year for MJ Morris is definitely a hindrance. And if they go Billy Edwards, this man was 33% passing completion last season. So both have a ton of inconsistencies and a ton of potential errors that could hurt this Maryland team. And then you've got no real game changer on the defensive line. That defensive line last year didn't have a defensive lineman that was just balling out. They had a couple guys who had like 2 or 3 sacks and it was consistent and you like to see that, but you didn't have a difference maker, somebody that puts the fear in the O-line. And I still don't think they have that. So I would call that a weakness right now. And then I would say you have a shallow running back depth. So if something happens to Hemby, a lot of this offense could fall apart. Now, the make or break for this Maryland matchup, in my eyes, this Maryland team's been getting a lot of love in the offseason, especially when it comes to the placement of their ranking heading into the season. I often see them well in front of Minnesota. I think it's a little weird because, I see that they got 8 wins the last 2 seasons, but Minnesota's returning production is more encouraging to me. The upside, the transfer quarterback that they brought in and the elite production he's had, the level of running back they have, the amount of returning talent to the offensive line, and then you still got star players back like John Joyner, Cody Lindenberg, Justin Wally on the defense. I just feel like Minnesota should have more benefit of the doubt, especially even though they only had 1 down year. A lot of young players got back in. But that being said, Maryland's been getting a lot of respect, and I think this is a very winnable game for Minnesota, especially at home. This is a game Minnesota will need to win in order to make a bowl game, in my opinion, because in a best-case scenario, this Maryland game could be a game where the Minnesota clinches bowl eligibility. Now, could you believe that week 9, we're looking at potentially clinching bowl eligibility against Maryland? If that's happening, this is a Gophers team that's making some noise, and fans would be going absolutely bonkers as far as the potential they could roll on after this game with Illinois on the schedule, with the Rutgers on the schedule, and trying to gain more momentum before you get to the tough stretch of Penn State and Wisconsin. So overall, I think this is a very key game that you have to win in the season. And I think that the top 3 make or breaks are going to be something that Minnesota can do well. But before I get to those, I do want to talk about how this could be potentially a bowl eligibility clinching game, because in a best case scenario, if Minnesota wins all 3 of their non-conference, North Carolina and then Rhode Island and Nevada, now you've chalked them up for the latter 2 games of that, but if they beat North Carolina to start the year, that's 3-0 on the season. Then you end up going to play at home against Iowa. If you can pull that game off, that's massive. But even if you can't, you have opportunities against both of the Cali schools. I'm not going to count Michigan as an opportunity for Minnesota right now. So if you can win 2 of the 3 versus Iowa and the Cali schools, and you take care of your non-conference, this game would be win number 6 if you could beat Maryland at home. So overall, the make or breaks for me in this game is 1, you got to frazzle the quarterback. You got to change up the picture. You got to really test them, create chaos, and make MJ Morris prove he can read the field, because he was not super strong in that department with North Carolina State, and it led to a lot of turnovers. And that's what you're going to want to try and do in this game. That's going to be huge. That's the second point for me. Turnovers will be the game changer in this game. If Minnesota takes care of the ball and they force 1 or 2 turnovers, I think Minnesota walks away with a dub, especially if you're consistently changing the picture on this quarterback and he's putting the ball into harm's way. So those 2 things are big keys for me. And the third key is whoever is the more efficient runner between DT and Hemby could be the key. I'm going to put my money on Darius Taylor every single day of the week. This dude is special, and I think a lot of the nation saw that and they're ready to see it again. So Darius Taylor, Hemby is my third potential make or break for this matchup. Now, the final thing we're going to talk about today to wrap up today's show is Gophers women's basketball. They're ready for a big 2024, not only on the court, but in recruiting as well. And we're going to talk about what has been going on with our Lady Gophers coming up next. First, I want to talk to you about our friends over at Gametime. You definitely want to download the app because it's the best ticketing app, hands down, in my opinion. They have some of the best coverage as far as ticket insurance and things like that. So you're covered by one of the best coverage programs in the game, but also they have some of the best killer last minute deals as you get closer to the first pitch, as you get closer to showtime, as you get closer to tip off or what have you. The prices usually are going down, and that is amazing. You can save up to 60% on different events. And that's another thing, is it's not just sporting events. You can go to concert venues, you can go to comedy shows, you can go to theater shows. You can find it all over on the Gametime app with last minute prices and the lowest price guarantee. You're definitely going to want to check them out. So go over to Gametime, download an account, and create an account. When you create your account and you download the app, you're going to want to use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's promo code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDON college, for $20 off your first purchase. Whether it be a theater event, a sporting event, or what have you, take advantage of Gametime. You also have the all-in price features where you can toggle that and you'll see it with no hidden fees. You have a panoramic seat view to see what your seat is before you buy the tickets. They've got you covered. They take care of you and they make you feel good. So definitely download the Gametime app. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Gophers fans, we're wrapping this one up today talking about the Gophers women's basketball team because I think they're ready for a big year in 2024, not only on the court, but also in the recruiting of classes of 2025 and 2026. Now, when we're looking at on the court and this team in general, I'm really intrigued by the depth across this team. I like the transfers they brought in. I like that all 5 starters are back. I love that some key rotational pieces like Maggie Zanano, like Nehemiah Holloway, they're back in tow. And so this is a lot of production and a lot of key minutes coming back for this young Gophers team that initially started the season off hot and on track to get to the NCAA tournament. Now, they missed the cut after some struggles after Mara and Sophie Hart went down to injuries, But that being said, they found their way to the NIT, the WNIT. They found their way all the way to the championship game. And again, that was without Mara for a large stretch of that. She came back for like a game or two. But overall, with a healthy Mara, with the depth on this team, I think the upside is tremendous, especially with them having another year within the system. So things can start to slow down, things can start to click, and it can start to add more complex measures to hopefully give other teams problems. So what I'm really intrigued by in the depth of this team is now you have some more bigs that can play the same role as Sophie Hart. So the play style and the identity doesn't have to shift when Sophie Hart isn't on the floor, which was a massive difference in last year's ending of the season when Sophie Hart went down to injury because the bigs just couldn't play the same role. They didn't have the same build. They didn't have the same presence. They didn't have the same skill set. But now the Gophers went and got 2 transfers that can fill that type of role, give Sophie some blows and some breathers on the bench. And then also, if she's ever in foul trouble or if an injury were to happen, hopefully you have players that can step up like Annika Stewart. So overall, I love that. And I think that should help them both defensively in their presence on the interior, which became a struggle, especially as they got to the Big Ten tournament, but also in not having lagging moments on rebounding, which is a key for Dawn Plitzowite. So overall, I think that that's going to be a major factor, is having more bigs, having more depth. Now, Amaya Battle's late strides on the season could be what takes this team from good to great, because if Mara Braun is fully healthy and Amaya Battle is playing like she played at that clip last year to end the year and doing that consistently, like game to game, night to night for the entire season, you're talking about a dynamic duo that could absolutely set the Big Ten on fire, and that would be amazing. And on top of that, you still have other depth and production around them. Now, a couple names to keep in mind: Taylor Woodson, McKenna Johnson, Kennedy Click. These are all younger players, 2 of them being newer to the team, the other one coming back from an injury and wasn't able to play for her true freshman season. They could all see time this upcoming season and be needed to step up as scoring options, scoring diversity, giving us a little bit of variety on the court. And I think all 3 of them could answer the call and be the scoring needs that this team needs beyond Amara Braun, beyond Amaya Battle. I think those 3 could really hold the keys to the upside of the offense, which struggled from time to time. Now, speaking of the offense, Grace Groholski was really good, especially from the 3-point line as a true freshman. But if she can figure out her scoring prowess on the inside, if she can figure out attacking the cup a little bit more, finding her mid-range jumper a little bit more consistently, if she adds those elements back to her game, it could elevate this team offensively to a whole nother level, especially because she has the ability. She did it in high school, so we know it's there. But I think last year, you're still a true freshman. You're still getting sped up. You're still getting used to the physicality, the timing, the speed of the game. I think she did really well at it, especially from the 3-point line. But I think as she adds that element back to her game, she becomes more of a weapon on the floor for Minnesota as well. And so I'm excited by that. And then finally, Minnesota is in a really nice spot recruiting wise, at least if they can land a couple of these recruits. Now, recently they were listed in the top 4 for, I believe her name is Sierra Parchment of the 2025 class. She's a 4-star forward. She listed Michigan, Maryland, Illinois, and Minnesota as her top 4. She's from Canada. She's the number 39 player in the class for Hoop Girls. So overall, she is a very high upside player that is very interested in Minnesota. And if you pair her with an already top 50 commit that Minnesota has in number 45 player McKenna Christensen from Wisconsin, you add those 2 players together, get 2 top 50 players into your true freshman 2025 class. That could be massive. That could be a game changer to keeping the sustained success beyond the Mara Braun class of Amaya, Mara, Nehemiah, and Mallory Heyer. If you keep on adding, and I think Sophie Hart is going to potentially stay with that group graduation and eligibility wise too, if she gets that extra year due to the injury and what have you. I think if you can continue to build and extend that athleticism, that high prowess, that high level recruits, it's going to go a long way to rebuilding this program and keeping it sustained. And then maybe you can add a Chloe Johnson, maybe you can add a Madden Greenway in these next few years beyond that. So overall, that could be huge. But they also are in the top 6 For Tori Orline, a 2026 class. She's from Minnesota. She named Florida, Maryland, Utah, Virginia Tech, and Michigan as her top 5, along with the Gophers for top 6. She's the number 46 player in the class of 2026 via Hoop Girls. And again, she's from Minnesota, so she could be a huge addition. If the Gophers pipeline, the Gophers recruiting keeps building stuff like this and continually getting top 100, top 50 girls to join the program, this is going to be an amazing run with Coach Don Plitzwhite and the rest of the staff. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to Gophers women's basketball. And if you have any thoughts on Gophers women's basketball, Maryland, or the entire football season, let me know them down in the comments below. But I appreciate you for tapping in. As always, row the boat, Ski-U-Mah, Gophers. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the next opponent on the schedule. I believe it's Illinois. I'll see you then. Row the boat, Ski-U-Mah, Gophers, as always. And don't forget to hit subscribe.